the next. Their inconsistency keeps you in a constant state of uncertainty, never knowing where you stand. One day they act like you matter, the next you're left questioning if you ever did. This unpredictability isn't just frustrating, it's emotional whiplash. At first you might rationalize their behavior. Maybe they're just busy, maybe they're going through something, but over time patterns emerge. They text you when they need something but disappear when you reach out. They make plans, then cancel last minute without apology. They promise to be there, yet somehow they never really are. This inconsistency isn't accidental, it's a choice. It's the result of someone prioritizing their own convenience over your emotional well-being. They keep you around just enough to maintain access, but not enough to build real trust. And that's the trap. You hold on, hoping the version of them that cares will stay, but it never does. The real damage isn't just in their actions, but in what it teaches you to accept. You start questioning yourself instead of questioning them. Maybe you're asking for too much. Maybe you misunderstood. Maybe if you just tried harder, they'd be more present. But here's the truth. People who care don't make you feel like you have to earn consistency. Their words and actions rarely match. They tell you you're important, but their behavior suggests otherwise. They apologize but don't change. They express enthusiasm but never follow through. And over time, their mixed signals become exhausting, draining your energy and confidence. Healthy relationships, whether friendships, family, or romantic, are built on stability. When someone truly cares, they show up even when it's inconvenient. They don't just reach out when they're lonely. They don't disappear when you need them. They create a sense of security, not confusion. But inconsistent people operate differently. They give just enough to keep you from walking away, but never enough to make you feel valued. They rely on your patience, your kindness, and your willingness to see the best in them. And in doing so, they make their inconsistency your problem instead of theirs. And the hardest part? The realization that they were never unreliable because they didn't know better. They were unreliable because it was never a priority to be anything else. There's a difference between hearing and listening. Hearing is passive. It happens whether we want it to or not. Listening, though, is intentional. It requires effort, attention, and a willingness to understand. And yet, some people in your life will make you feel like your words are background noise, like what you say doesn't really matter. You've seen it before. You're in the middle of speaking and their eyes glaze over, they nod at the right moments, but their mind is elsewhere. Or worse, they interrupt, waiting for their turn to speak rather than absorbing what you're saying. Conversations with them feel one-sided, like you're talking into a void, hoping for connection but receiving indifference. People who don't listen aren't just missing words, they're missing you. They miss your feelings, your needs, your perspective. When someone truly listens, they acknowledge your thoughts. They validate your experiences. They make you feel seen. But when they don't, it creates a slow, silent erosion of trust. At first, you may try harder. Maybe if you explain things differently, they'll get it. Maybe if you bring it up at the right time, they'll engage. But over time, you start to shrink. You start to share less because you already know how the conversation will go. And in that space of being unheard, loneliness creeps in. Even when they're right in front of you, the worst part is when they pretend to listen. They'll say, I hear you, but nothing changes. They'll nod and smile, but their actions contradict their words. Listening isn't just about acknowledging sound, it's about responding with intention. And when someone repeatedly ignores that responsibility, it becomes clear. They're not absent-minded, they're indifferent. When you bring up something important, do they remember? Do they follow up? Do they ask questions that show they care? Because listening isn't just about the moment. It's about how they carry your words forward. When people care, they hold on to what you say, not because they have to, but because they want to. The problem with people who don't listen is that they teach you to lower your expectations. They train you to stop expecting deep conversations, to stop sharing openly, to settle for surface-level interactions. And in doing so, they make silence feel safer than speaking. And maybe that's the real issue, not just that they don't listen, but that over time they make you feel like you're not worth listening to. Relationships should feel like a balance. a give and take that flows naturally. But some people only show up with open hands, ready to receive. They take your time, your energy, your kindness, without ever offering the same in return. At first, it might not be obvious. You give because you care, because that's who you are, but over time you start to notice the pattern. They reach out when they need something, a favor, a listening ear, support when they're struggling, but when the roles reverse, when you're the one in need, there's an excuse, they're busy, they forgot, they changed the subject. It's not that they're incapable of giving, it's that they choose not to when there's nothing in it for them. You start to feel drained, but you convince yourself that this is what friendship, love, or loyalty looks like. Maybe they just don't realize how much you do. Maybe if you explain, they'll see the imbalance. But the truth is, people who take more than they give aren't unaware. They know exactly how much you pour into them, and they're comfortable receiving it without reciprocating. The weight of their needs starts to feel heavier. Their problems take up space in your life. But when you try to share yours, the conversation shifts back to them. It's not that they don't care, it's that their needs always come first. And the more you give, the more they expect, until your generosity becomes an obligation rather than a choice. At some point you realize you're the one making the effort, you're the one checking in, planning, supporting, making sure they feel valued. And when you stop, even briefly, the silence is telling. They don't notice. Or worse, they make you feel guilty for pulling back, because in their world, you were never supposed to need anything from them. Healthy relationships don't operate on transactions, but they do require mutual respect. They require both people to show up, not just when it's convenient, but when it matters. But with people who take more than they give, the relationship becomes lopsided, built on what you can offer rather than who you are. And the hardest part isn't even the exhaustion, it's the realization that no matter how much you give, it will never be enough to change them. Because people who take without giving don't see it as an issue, they see it as the way things are, as the way things have always been. And maybe that's the real problem. Not that they don't know how to give, but that they've never had to. Growth changes things. It shifts the way you think, the way you move, the way you see yourself. But not everyone in your life will celebrate that evolution. Some people will ignore it, downplay it, or even resist it, because your growth challenges the version of you they've become comfortable with. You start making progress, setting new goals, creating new boundaries, and suddenly they act differently. They joke about how you've changed, but there's a sting in their words. They remind you of who you used to be, not as a celebration of how far you've come, but as a way to keep you in place. They don't acknowledge your hard work, your sacrifices, your effort. They act as if it's nothing, as if you're still the same person you were before. Maybe it's subtle. They don't ask about your wins. They don't show interest in your progress. When you share an achievement, they brush past it, change the subject, or compare it to something bigger. It's not that they don't see your growth. It's that they don't want to acknowledge it, because doing so would mean confronting their own stagnation. You start to feel the distance. The conversations feel different. The connection feels strained. You wonder if you're imagining it, if you're overthinking, but deep down you know. They were comfortable with you when you played small, when you fit into the role they expected. Now that you're stepping into something greater, they don't know how to support it. They may even try to pull you back. They remind you of past mistakes, question your choices, or plant seeds of doubt. Not always out of malice, but out of their own fear. Because when you grow, it forces them to look at themselves. It forces them to question why they're standing still while you're moving forward. Support isn't about agreeing with everything you do. It's about showing up, about recognizing your effort, about standing beside you even when your path changes. But when someone disregards your growth, it's a sign they were never invested in who you were becoming, only in who you used to be. And the hardest part isn't just their reaction, it's realizing that their version of you is no longer your reality. That the space you once fit into, the dynamic you once had, doesn't align with where you're going. You see it clearly now, the resistance, the lack of encouragement, the unspoken tension. And maybe that's the real challenge, not just growing, but accepting that some people will never grow with you.